It's 200 a.m., and I'm taking inventory at my convenience store. Suddenly, there was a violent slapping sound on the closed glass door. I looked around and saw a completely naked woman pleading with me through the glass. I stared at her for a full minute and licked my lips in satisfaction. How nice. A new prey at my door. I opened the glass door and the woman burst in with a flutter. She was cloaked. Her face was red and swollen. And as soon as she came in, she threw her arms around my legs and begged me. Please. Help me. My husband has been abusing me. And he is about to beat me to death. It was only then that I saw that her naked body was equally covered with bloodstains. Especially the bruises on her chest, which had turned a saucy purple color. It was obvious that the husband she was talking about had struck hard. I looked from behind her. A bare-chested man with a green dragon and white tiger tattooed on his chest had already walked up to the entrance of my store with a stick. Close the door. Close the door quickly, close the door quickly. The woman screamed in terror, her voice changing tone due to her overwhelming fear. But it was too late. The man's foot had already stepped in. It's over. Watching the man approach step by step, the woman screamed in despair and hid behind me. I understood her despair. Because I am also a woman who is shorter and thinner than her. Trying to resist the attack of the man in front of me was simply impossible. Call the police. Call the police. The woman saw my cell phone on the counter and reached out to pick it up. Bang. With a wave of my hand, I swung the cell phone to the floor. You. The woman looked at me incredulously, the light in her eyes dimming a little. Bitch. Give me death over here. If I don't beat you to death today. I'm not a man. The man cursed while grabbing the woman's hair. I watched coldly. In fact, this is not the first time a man has beaten a woman. Many times. I've seen this woman beaten on the street, and wondered why they haven't divorced yet. The man lifted the woman out from behind me like an eagle catching a chicken. Don't. Don't. The woman struggled frantically. Her eyes filled with fear, pulling on my clothes to death and not letting go. But she soon despaired. Because I mercilessly broke her hands. Just bear with it. I stroked her head, like I was calming a child. There was surveillance in my store. And if I wanted to beat her to death, I should have found an unmonitored place. Then I looked at the violent man, smiled at him and gave him this idea. The violent man calmed down. And he looked at me with interest, his eyes full of lewdness. Out the door and to the right. Then to the left and then to the right. There was a deserted old well, with no surveillance around it. I offered the man a place to go, implying that it would be the best place for him to go if he wanted to take out his anger. Same woman. How can you be so? I know why. You're lovers. Conspiring to murder me. Why for the woman screamed in despair. But before she could finish her sentence, she was slapped by the man. The slap was so hard that blood flowed from the woman's nose. Then, the man grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out. Looking at their faraway backs, my eyes began to turn gloomy. I sighed, locked the glass door, turned off the lights, and went out the back door of the store. On the way home, a stray dog leapt out from a hidden corner. Oh, it ran to my feet and kept barking. As usual, I spread the packed food in front of it. While watching it eat, I talked to it from the heart. I don't have a family. And in the past 2 years, all the words in my heart could only be said to it. The stray dog quickly finished eating the food in front of it, and rubbed its mouth on my hand twice. I helped it dry the residue around its mouth and hugged it tightly, just like hugging a loved one. Then looking at its faraway back, a bitter smile appeared. The next evening, someone found a mutilated corpse by the barren well. However, it was not a female corpse, but a male corpse. The body was killed by a stabbing. A layer of skin had been cut off the chest raw, and the whole piece was bloody. The body's right hand was severed and the male organ was missing. This news and description came to me when I was swiping through the news after helping a customer with his check. How pathetic. I wanted to domestically abuse my wife. But I ended up in such a situation myself. I sighed, took out a bottle of nail polish and started to paint my nails. The nail polish was bright red. And when applied to the nails, it looked like bright red blood. A color I've been cool with since I was a kid. A man was killed in the neighborhood. We've seen the security camera footage. And just like the last case, the victim had been in your convenience store before the accident. When I was applying the color, the voice of a middle-aged man suddenly rang in my ears. I looked up and found two men in uniform standing by the counter, staring at me fixedly. The one in the lead was an older middle-aged man. I thought he looked a bit familiar but couldn't remember for a moment. I lowered my head and ignored them, absently continuing to paint my fingernails. Pira, I'm asking you a question. Please answer. The middle-aged officer raised his voice. Pira? He actually knew my name? Yes, that man beat his own wife. His wife came to the store and asked me for help. But I didn't care for fear of getting in trouble. Officer, am I guilty of not minding my own business? I put down the nail polish in my hand and stared at them and replied. Where did you go after they left? I have 2 doors here. The back door is closer to my home. I went out the back door and went home to sleep. What time did you get home? The back door that street has a surveillance. You can call out to see it. Just know that I walked all the way home. Never came out. We will naturally investigate this. I'm just asking as a matter of course. That middle-aged police officer has been staring at me. His eyes are very sharp. Staring at me very uncomfortable. After probably staring at me for a full 2 minutes, they started to turn around and head for the door. I originally thought that our meeting ended here. Who knows? When that middle-aged police officer walked to the door, he suddenly turned around and said, Pira, do you still remember the dismemberment case 13 years ago? Hearing these words, I was stunned. Looking up again, I finally remembered him. He was the police officer who handled that dismemberment case back then. Ador Jan. That case had been a sensation, known as the dismemberment domestic violence case. A 13-year-old girl, late at night, knifed her stepfather to death, who had often abused her mother. Afterwards, she brutally dismembered her stepfather and even threw his head to the dogs. Since she was only 13 years old, she was not criminally liable. That girl. That was me. Pira. 13 years have passed. Ador Jan is much older than before. And I've matured a lot. I didn't expect him to recognize me at once. Just because you've done it before doesn't mean you'll do it again. As a cop, you shouldn't look at people through colored glasses. Despite the ripples inside, I replied as calmly as I could. Ador Jan stared at me for a long time again. His eyes were complicated. I knew what was going on in his mind. But ignoring it was the best way for me to fight back. It wasn't until I saw them go away that my pretense of calm finally shattered. I wrapped my arms around my shoulders and began to shake uncontrollably. When I saw someone coming towards my store, I scrambled out and put up a suspended sign. I retreated back to the counter and hid underneath it, tears dripping down my face in big drops. I really didn't want to reminisce about the past. It was a very unpleasant past. Once upon a time, I had a warm and happy home. There was a kind father, a gentle and kind mother, and a brother who doted on me. Unfortunately, all the happiness was scattered in the wind with Dad's death and Mom's remarriage. At first, my stepfather treated us well. But in less than a month, he showed his true colors. He liked to drink and act tough, and often brought his fox friends over to the house to party. Whenever my mom did something a little wrong, or nagged a little too much, he felt like my mom had made him look bad. I'll always remember the night he was upset with my mom's behavior and dragged her into the bedroom to beat her up after her friends left. Open the door. Open the door. I rapped vigorously on the door. But the harder I slapped and the louder I screamed, the harder my stepfather beat. I couldn't find my cell phone. So I ran out to ask the neighbors for help. But none of them would open the door. I returned to the bedroom door and slapped until my hands were swollen before I finally cracked the door open. My mom, however, had been beaten all over by my stepfather. The corners of her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was covered in blood. And she was crying and screaming in pain. "Bad man. You hit Mom. Bad man." I grabbed a coat hanger and rushed to my stepfather. But my stepfather grabbed the hanger and slapped me to the ground. The hanger, one by one, smacked me. This scene was seen by my brother, who had just come back from study hall, and he ran up to grab the hanger and fought with my stepfather. However, my skinny brother was no match for my stepfather and was soon knocked to the ground. Finally, my brother found a cell phone and called the police. When he saw the police, his stepfather admitted his mistake like a son of a bitch, saying that he had committed a crime after drinking and that he would definitely change. And my mom also cried and pleaded for him, saying he was just impulsive. The police could not. Had to let the stepfather wrote a guarantee and left. But how can a dog change to eat shit? After that, my stepfather tortured us more and more. My mom didn't dare to get a divorce. She said she had no money, and we depended on my stepfather for food, drink, and education. So she had to put up with it. Until one day, my brother never came back. Someone found a severed hand in a dry well, and it was analyzed and found to be my brother's hand. I suspected that my brother had died at the hands of my stepfather. Half a month after my brother's disappearance, on a night when my mom was beaten to death again, my stepfather's head was found by the garbage, already mutilated by dogs. The police came to the house to search, and found other limbs of my stepfather in the house. And I, calmly, confessed to all the crimes. After that time, my mom lived in perpetual fear and died soon after. I, on the other hand, was able to finish college with the financial support of tin-hearted people and half work, half study. After that, I saved money and opened this convenience store. However, I'm traumatized. Every time I see a man beating up a woman, I hate it with a passion. Pira. Another male body was found by the deserted well last night. On this day, I had just brushed up on a news story about a man's body when a doorman came to the door again. I froze for a moment. A nail polish on my hands all over my fingertips. I settled down. Yes, I just saw it on the news too. But what does it have to do with me? This is already the third case. And all three had the same modus operandi, with the victims having their right arms and male organs chopped off. I think I understand the killer's psychology. Oh, what mentality? Because the victim used his right hand to beat his wife with a stick, and the murderer chopped off his right arm. It's a punishment. And cutting off his male organ is a sarcastic reference to his unworthiness to be a man. It seems this murderer could be called a chivalrous man if he was placed in ancient times. But why is Adorj discussing this with me? I looked at Adorjan with a fearless face. I've seen all the CCE verses. And all three victims had passed by your convenience store when they were beating their wives. It's none of my business if they passed by. Didn't you guys investigate? When they died, all the surveillance showed that I wasn't there. And you've checked my phone records. Clean and clear. After emphasizing that, I suddenly cried out in tears. Adorjan, I made one mistake. Should I never be able to turn it around? Do I have to be treated as a sinner forever? I want to be normal. I really do. I cried my heart out, causing the people around me to gather around. Adorjan was a little embarrassed and a little compassionate. Don't be like this. I'm not suspecting you. It's just that there are too many coincidences. I'm masking as a rule. In fact, you can ask their wives. They were there. They should know more about what happened. They were drugged before the incident and didn't see anything. But I'm sure the killer will reveal himself one day. Adorjan put that down and turned to walk away. I knew that with these last words, he was speaking to me. After the crowd dispersed, I turned around to dry my ears, let out a long breath, and resumed my cold expression. As I passed that road home at night, I ran into the stray dog again. The weather was already cold. So I decided to bring it home. Give it a set of clothes and make a nest in the meantime. In the middle of the night, when I was putting a warm coat on it, there was a knock at the door. Who is it? My whole heart lifted. May I come in? A very faint female voice came from the doorway. I petted the stray dog lovingly and walked to the door. Through the cat's eye, I saw a woman's face. After carefully recognizing the face, I was shocked. She was the wife of the second victim, the same naked woman who had come into my store in the middle of the night that day to ask for help. How did she know I lived here? What was she doing here late at night looking for me? I didn't squeak or open the door, but turned to the stray dog I had brought home, only to find that there was only a coat left on the couch and the stray dog was gone. I looked out the window and saw that it was limping away into the distance. It turned out that when it heard the knock on the door, it was so scared that it jumped out of the window and fled. It was only today that I realized that we lived in the same building. I couldn't sleep and saw that there was a light in your room. So I have something very important to tell you. The woman at the door continued when she saw that I wouldn't open the door. I sighed and opened the door after confirming from the cat's side that no one was around her. Just the moment the door opened, I scanned the flash of panic in her eyes. Come in and have a seat. I pointed to the couch and poured her a glass of water. She took the glass, but her hands were shaking. The shaking was not like shaking from cold, but like shaking from fear. I stared at her coldly, wondering what the hell she was selling. I know that day you were trying to help me, that's why you let him bring me over to RI. She took a sip of water and said with a slight tremor in her voice. Only. She kept looking down at her glass of water as she said it, not looking up at me. I felt something was wrong. It was as if she was deliberately trying to trap me. How could I help you? I despise women like you the most. I dismissed her claim. Oh? She finally raised her head and looked at me suspiciously. But when she met my eyes, she averted her gaze in panic. Do you know what the most pathetic woman is? It's women like you who would rather be beaten to death by a man than dare to leave him to survive. You are like parasites that only dare to cling to men. And even if you are rubbed hard by them, you don't dare to move even half a step. Do you dare to say that that time was the first time you were beaten by him? After hearing what I said, the woman froze. Her eyes filled with tears. And only after a long time did she say something. But he's my husband after all. If he dies, I have nothing left. I snorted. Sure enough, there are some women that just prefer to be killed rather than be independent. This kind of woman. What's the use of saving her? I think I'd better leave now, so I won't affect your rest. The woman looked restrained and uneasy, standing up to say goodbye to me. But the person didn't move. Please make yourself at home. I pointed to the door and then went to the restroom. When I came out again, the woman was gone. I looked over to the couch and suddenly realized that something was missing. After thinking of a possibility, I slapped myself hard. I walked quickly to the window, took out my binoculars and looked out, and saw the woman's hurriedly departing figure. It turned out that she didn't even live with us. I saw that the woman traveled to the corner and met up with a man. She handed something in her hand to the other man. After seeing that thing, my heart fell to the bottom. It was over. 4 days on end. I didn't see the stray dog again. The weather was cold, but not as cold as the cold inside me. Where the hell did it go? Was it cold? Does it get enough to eat? Is it still safe? I was so anxious that I wanted to put up a notice looking for the dog. But I felt powerless to do anything about it. I couldn't describe it. I couldn't draw it. And there was no way anyone would recognize it. The weather was getting colder and colder, and there wasn't a single patron in the convenience store. I sat in front of the counter, thinking about something, and tears spilled out. Kira, about this jacket. We would like to ask for your assistance in the investigation. Adorjan's voice rang in my ears again. I wasn't surprised and didn't look up. I knew this day would come ever since I saw that woman take the jacket from my house and give it to Adorjan. Pira. On this jacket. We extracted fibers that belong to your brother. He's not dead. Is he? In the interrogation room. Adorjan turned up the heat a bit. But I still felt cold. Is he really not dead? If you guys see him, tell him I miss him. I wrapped my arms around my shoulders and said quietly. I'm sure you've already met. Where is he? Those murders. Did he have anything to do with them? Where is he? I don't know where he is. Haven't you caught him? If we'd caught him, we wouldn't be asking you. I don't know where he is. I'm looking for him too. I miss him. If you guys find him, please don't hurt him. He's already in a bad way. I couldn't help but cry in pain when I said that. Adorjan sighed softly and handed me a piece of paper and poured another glass of water. We have to find him, or there will be more victims. Can you give us some information? For example, how did you meet and how did you communicate? How do you communicate? I wiped away my tears and looked at Adorjan suspiciously. After a moment, I laughed to myself. Adorjan, are you saying I was the mastermind, directing my brother to kill those men who were domestically abusive? Pira, we just want to know. How do you and your brother usually meet and communicate? I lowered my head, not wanting to answer any more questions. We found subtle fibers belonging to your brother on all 3 of the victims, consistent with those on that jacket. The jacket was obtained at your home, proving that you had recent contact. You can't deny that. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails sank deep into my flesh. Even though I already knew the answer, I was still furious when I heard Adorjan repeat this jacket thing again. That woman, coming to my house that night, was clearly to be a scout. I was tearless. Some women are really incorrigible. Seeing that he couldn't really ask anything from me, Adorjan sent me back home. I wandered aimlessly through the streets by myself. I was expecting to run into my brother, but I was afraid of running into him, for I knew that I was followed by plainclothes policemen who must also be on the lookout for my brother. As I walked through an alley, I heard a whimpering sound coming from inside. I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. Help! I finally heard it. It was the voice of a woman begging for help. Suddenly, the woman let out another scream. After a moment's hesitation, I walked towards the alley. I saw it. A man was frantically punching and kicking a woman. The woman was holding her head and desperately dodging, and her mouth kept begging for mercy. I looked around. There was no one but me. Here, there wasn't any surveillance either. I fixed my mind, took a deep breath, took out my cell phone from my pocket, and dialed the police. Only, when the other end just uttered a hello, I immediately pressed the phone. Because I saw a black shadow leap out from the corner and quickly rush towards the man. Don't! I yelled out in despair. But it was already too late. The man who was violently beating the woman turned around quickly and kicked off the knife in the black shadow's hand. Then, the man and the woman joined forces to clamp down on the black shadow, pressing him to death. The black shadow was pressed so hard that he couldn't move. His mouth let out a whimpering scream, and his eyes looked at me in despair. Brother! I screamed miserably and fell to my knees, tears falling like rain. The moment I walked into the alley, I could see that the man and woman in front of me were fishing for law enforcement. Although the man looked fierce, I could easily tell it was all thunder and no rain. How can someone like me, who has seen so much domestic violence, not see if it's a real fight or a fake fight? To go along with their show, I chose to call the police. But to my utter surprise, my brother rushed out at that moment and was caught by them. Soon, Adorjan also appeared before us. However, when the few of them saw the figure pinned on the ground, they were taken aback. For what was pinned underneath? Where was it a human being? It clearly looked like a dirty stray dog. If it wasn't for the fact that it had stood up and pulled out a knife, no one would have believed that it could be a human and rest up. Yes, the shell underneath this dog's skin was my dearest brother. The dog's headgear and the fur were both made for him by my own hands. No one will ever know why he used to walk on all fours. No one will ever know why he preferred to be a dog. And why Adorjan and the others got rid of his dog gear. Throughout the process, his brother struggled, whimpering. He was skinny but strong, making Adorjan and the others use a lot of brute force. Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. I looked at my brother with pain in my heart. But there was nothing I could do. The equipment was removed, revealing my brother's thin face and body. Adorjan and the others tried to pull brother up to walk on both legs but still failed. Brother would only lie on the ground and kept screaming there until I approached him and he calmed down. I wanted to talk to my brother. I looked at Adorjan. He nodded and I saw the compassion showing in his eyes. Brother, stop wandering. Let's go home. Okay? I gently stroked my brother's head, tears spilling out. My brother whimpered twice more and raised the palm of his only remaining hand, gently wiping the tears from my face. That hand of his had been stained with the blood of 3 evil men. But to me, it was the warmest hand in the world. We checked. Your brother has serious mental problems and has been sent to the hospital for treatment. But there are still a lot of details that we need to find out from you. When I came to this cold interrogation room again, my heart was no longer cold. Going to the hospital for treatment was the best place for my brother to go. There was a time when I wanted to take him to the hospital for treatment many times. But he escaped. We rewatched the previous surveillance and found that before all 3 victims were killed, you had contact with the stray dog your brother played. In other words, you consciously communicated what you saw to your brother, signaling him to commit the murder? I did not. I denied it categorically. I really hate domestically abusive men. The less capable they are, the more they like to beat up women and use bullying as a capital to show off their masculinity. Cut. So you just see one and kill one. How can that be? I'm a scholar. How could I do such a crime? My brother is my only family. I just confide my resentment and dissatisfaction with my family. Is it wrong to confide? There is nothing wrong with confiding in them. But there is something wrong with leading them to commit murder. My brother is a mentally ill person. He can't control what he does. How can I guide him? I argued my case and the air froze for a split second. Adorjan, do you want to know why my brother would rather be a dog than a human? Adorjan's eyes drooped a little, and he nodded at me, signaling me to go on. At the age of 13, the same night my brother disappeared. As I spoke, my thoughts went back to the night that had terrified me. In the middle of the night that day, I was awakened by a sound of debauched jeering. I opened my bedroom door, only to see my mom standing in the doorway, pushing me in quickly. What had happened? I asked my mom in disbelief as I rubbed my eyes. And nothing. You have to go to school tomorrow. Go to bed early. Mom looked a little panicked. But the more she kept me from going out, the more I wanted to see what was going on. I pushed my mom away. And just as my feet stepped out of the bedroom door, I heard a dog barking. It didn't sound like a real dog barking, but like a dog barking like a person would learn to bark. The sound was coming from my mom's bedroom and I walked over and pushed the door open with a jerk. I saw a scene that overwhelmed me. My stepfather, who was red in the face from drinking, was pointing a stick at my brother. Brother, on the other hand, was on the floor like a dog, with his tail between his hips, woofing away. Brother, what are you doing? I couldn't believe that the brother in front of me was the hero-like brother in my heart. At this moment, his eyes were dark and full of cowering and fear. Pira. Go to bed. Go. Mom came from behind, saw the gaze my stepfather was casting and panicked, trying to pull me out. You don't care if he does this to brother? Brother is your own son. How can you bear to let someone else do this to him? I felt my heart break and cried uncontrollably. Shut up. We're having fun. As long as he makes me happy, your mom will be spared the pain of her skin. Ha 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 ha. The devil that is my stepfather laughed and duglanted, poking my brother's tail with a stick in the process. Pervert, I screamed hysterically. My stepfather swung his stick and hit me squarely in the head, smashing my head with a buzzing sound. At the sight, my brother finally looked up. I thought he would take it out on me. But to my surprise, he came over on all fours and vigorously vaulted my mom and I out the door with his head. The door slammed shut, and the long, unrelenting sound of a barking dog came from inside. I felt my whole world fall apart, and I looked hatefully at my mom, who twisted her head away in shame. I never thought that she had sacrificed her brother to Step, and she, too, never wanted to leave this perverted man. I hated her. I hated this kind of woman who disregarded everything in order to cling to a man. As a result of being tortured for so long, your brother was so mentally destroyed that he truly thought of himself as a dog? Yes, after that night, I never saw him again. And when did you see him again? Almost 2 years. I did try to bring him home, but he wouldn't do it. He just wanted to roam. He even begged me to make him a dog suit to make him feel more secure. I saw how happy he was staying with the dogs, so I let him. Adorjan nodded with some sadness in his eyes. He wanted to be a dog because being a dog kept him and his family safe, and he had nothing to worry about. So once he hears of a man's domestic violence, he punishes them as a dog. Adorjan made a final summary, and I nodded in agreement. But I still want to ask. You really didn't intentionally authorize your brother to kill those abusers? Adorjan looked at me with a torchlight gaze. No. I look back at Adorjan with a firm gaze. Like I said, I made that mistake once, and I would never let myself make it again. I don't have anyone else around me to talk to, and I share all my joys and sorrows only with my brother. He hates domestic abusers. He's going to punish them. What's it got to do with me? After saying that, Adorjan and I looked at each other and stared at each other for a few minutes. Eventually, he nodded, signaling that I could go. Stepping out of the door of the police station, the sunlight projected onto my body. I felt rejuvenated. Next, I was going to see my mentally disturbed brother. I'm sure he'll be able to be a normal and happy person after treatment. Extra. My name is Pira and I have a brother who loves me very much. I have a secret that I will never tell anyone. That is, I have never had blood on my hands. Because my stepfather was killed by my brother. Half a month after my brother fled the house, he sneaked back late one night. He climbed in through my window. I was a light sleeper, and was soon awakened by the sound. He made a shoosing gesture to me and then sat down on the edge of my bed with a look of heartache and sorrow on his face. I was thrilled to see my brother alive and covered my mouth dead to keep from crying out. My brother's right hand was wearing a glove, but his left hand was empty. I held back my grief and quietly asked him if his hand had been cut off by his stepfather. He shook his head and nodded again, telling me that it was indirectly broken by his stepfather, because he wanted to escape from the house. He stole money from his stepfather in the middle of the night and was discovered by his stepfather. During the chase, he fled to a deserted well and threw his hand on the blade of a kitchen knife stuck in the edge of the deserted well. When he looked down, his hand was cut off and fell into the well. Stepfather saw his hands full of blood. A little panic, turned around and left. Seeing the bottomless deserted well, my brother finally endured the severe pain and went to a clinic to treat the wound. After that, it was a life of wandering. Pira, brother doesn't want to see you guys suffer anymore. I squatted outside for a long time today, and saw that when you were still at school, my stepfather hit mom hard again. And when you came back from school, he scolded you hard again. Mom, she deserved it. When I think of my mom, a tinge of hatred rises in my heart. I haven't said a word to her since my brother left. I've also tried running away from home, only to be sent back in the end. All I could do was wiggle my fingers and count the days, expecting the day I could escape from home to come sooner. Mom also has her own hardships. Anyway, brother won't let you suffer anymore. After saying this, my brother walked out of my bedroom door, gave me another lingering look back, and closed the door. Immediately after that, I heard the door on my mom's side open and a muffled scream. Then again, the The sound of something being chopped was heard. I didn't dare open the door. I just clutched my shoulders tightly, and didn't dare let out a breath. I don't know how long it was before my bedroom door was pushed open again. My brother, covered in blood, stood in the doorway and gave me a small smile. Pira, no one will ever bully you again. My brother said that he would always protect you. Although I was only 13 years old at the time, I also clearly realized that what was happening in front of me. Brother, please go quickly. I killed my stepfather. Please. Go. My brother looked at me, wide-eyed. But soon, he understood what I meant. Under my desperate plea, he finally agreed. I actually don't like the color bright red. But in order to show how vicious I am, I forced myself to face it and forced myself to like the bright red color that looks like blood. And one of the right-ass things my mom did before she died was to not reveal the truth. To acquiesce to me killing my stepfather and letting my brother live. For the next 10 years, I missed my brother every minute of every day and tried in vain to find him. Until 2 years ago, I found an extremely human-like dog inside a pack of stray dogs. He was my dear brother, whom I recognized even in ashes. I don't know what has happened in the past 10 years. My brother's sanity is no longer very clear. But he still recognizes me and smiles stupidly when he sees me. I tried to take him to the hospital, but all he would do was scream, and would only stay with the dogs. He even gestured and begged me to make him a proper dog suit, which I agreed to with tears in my eyes. After that day, I would regularly bring him food and drinks, and I would also say all the things in my heart to him. Brother, I saw a man beating his wife on the street today. The beating was so cruel. His head was broken and he still didn't stop. It reminded me of my stepfather. It was so hard to feel in my heart. Brother, today a woman was beaten by her husband, and came to the store to beg me to save her. But how can I save her? But how can I save her? Who can save a woman if she doesn't stand up for herself and fight back? Brother, why are there domestic violence men in the world? Why do they think beating up women is the only way to show their masculinity? If only all men in the world were like you. Only men who protect women are real men. Brother, there are a lot of stray dogs by the deserted well. I want to lure them there. Those stray dogs will bite them, right? Some men, are really worse than dogs. Later on, the men who committed domestic violence died one by the deserted well in a brutal manner. When the first dead man appeared, I was taken aback, with a vague feeling in my mind that my brother might have done it. When the second victim appeared, seeing his vicious and brutal appearance, I really wanted him to die. It wasn't until the third victim appeared that I felt that my brother couldn't go on like this, that he needed to be saved. So that night, I took him home because I knew someone was following me. I knew the woman was sent by Ad or Jan to work undercover. I let her in on purpose and my brother escaped. So again, I deliberately let the woman take the jacket that belonged to my brother. I really wanted my brother to be caught by the police. After all, it's not illegal to kill someone mentally ill, and my brother can still get regular treatment. Why not?